So in my last video, I showed you how to build this beautiful machine right next to me. Building machine, a lot of people are scared of, but one of the things people are more scared of than that is wiring. In this video, I'm going to show you how to connect each and every cable, where they're coming from, where they're going, and I'm going to describe every single cable and what it does. That way, not only do you know how to connect everything, but what each and every cable does. That way you can explain this to your friend if you're helping your friend build their machine as well. Then after we're done wiring everything, then we're gonna go ahead and make everything look pretty, and I'm gonna run through everything with you. So let's get started. So one of the things I mentioned when I was doing the build is that I was going to remove the video card and the power supply. That way I get the cabling all nice and neat. And of course, you know, it makes it harder to film with the video card there blocking all the cables. One thing you'll also notice is the liquid cooling unit is all attached. It's also attached at the fans. The liquid cooling unit and the fans up here, they're already cabled as I did in the other video. Now the pump and everything is not connected, and I'll do that in this video. If you wanted to check out that video, I'll link it down below. So we'll just go ahead and remove the video card. After unscrewing your video card, we'll just go ahead and hold this little retention mechanism. We'll push it in, and that's going to go ahead and release the card. But make sure you have your hand, at least one hand under it. That way you don't drop the card. And then after that's pressed, then you're able to remove the card. If you don't push that in and you pull really hard on the card, you could end up damaging your PCIe slot. Now coming around to the bottom, we're gonna go ahead and remove the power supply. I put it in there because it is part of the hardware, but I need to remove it because it is a modular power supply and it's much easier to connect the cables outside of the case than inside, and I'll show you why in 1 second. Inside the case, this is where you would plug in everything to the power supply. And it can become very cumbersome the more things you have inside of the case. For example, this case comes with a little tray right over here for more SSDs. So that gives you about 2 inches worth of space between the power supply and that cage. So it's always best to do that outside of the case. So I'll just take it out here. So for the power supply, I bought this brand new P5 because as video cards are demanding more and more power every single day, we're going to need another VGA. The G3 had 1, 2, and 3, but this one has VGA 1, 2, 3, and 4. You never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Supposedly a new power supply form factor, but we don't know just yet. What I do before I even think about putting it inside of the system, every single component that's going to go into the machine, I pair up with a cable. So for example, we have the motherboard, so the ATX 24 pin. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect that. Every motherboard has either a 4-pin CPU power or an 8-pin EPS CPU power. Some motherboards have 2 8-pins and some motherboards have an 8 and a 4-pin. This particular motherboard has an 8 and a 4. So I have 2 2x4, so CPU number 2 and CPU number 1. I'm gonna plug in number 1 here. And the reason I said 2x4 is because it'll either connect to an 8 or it can use a 4. And then the second one is also the same. It can connect to an 8 or a 4. So now, because originally I didn't have a SATA drive, but I decided to put one in there just to help you out on the cabling aspect, we're going to use one SATA connection. This power supply has 1, 2, 3 SATA connections. And even though you don't need to put it in 1, 2, 3 order, I like to. My system has a liquid cooling unit and a fan controller that connect with SATA power. Now, because I'm adding a SATA SSD, I'm going to plug in another one just in case and to protect me more in the future. That way I don't need to take the power supply out and mess up my cabling. So there will be 2 SATA powers, each of them having 3 connections, 4 connections actually. Now, again, because we have 4 connections here and we never know what tomorrow is going to bring, I'm going to go ahead and connect all 4 of them. It brings 2 8-pins so that you can either use an 8-pin or a 6+2. Some video cards have a 6 PCIe plug or some have an 8 PCIe plug. Because there aren't 4, I'm going to have to plug in one that has a 6+2 to be an 8, and then a connection to 6+2 to be an 8. I'm not going to use this guy. I'm just going to use the straight one that comes directly straight from the power supply into there. And again, because I prepare for the future, I'm gonna go ahead and connect that in here, and I can always tuck that away a little bit later. So now we're just going to pop in that new power supply that's all heavy because we have cables attached to it. And then we're gonna screw it in. Since we're gonna be pulling on all those cables, we need to give it some weight here. You're not going to want to screw them in tightly, just enough so that the screw has a hold of the screw hole, because you'll notice as we're screwing them in, the power supply starts settling in. On this one, the fourth one, we can screw it in all the way. You'll notice the power supply moving because it's pulling the power supply in. This one didn't move as much as the last one. Okay, so now let's take notice of where all the connections are going to go. Coming out of this grommet, the bottom grommet, we can come to the SATA connections, potentially the USB 3, but I'm thinking USB 3 will be better at the bottom of the top grommet. These are the grommets that'll be better coming out of here. That way it's more direct. And then USB-C. And then over here is the ATX 24 pin, the motherboard power. Now coming up a little bit, we can see right above here, this is where the 8-pin and the 4-pin EPS and CPU power are going to come from. And we can reach that around the back up here, the back of the motherboard tray, right along here, through this hole up here. And then up here, we have some 4-pin fan headers, CPU fan, and CPU opt. The ARGB and RGB connection. Then along the bottom here, we have 2 more SATA connections, USB 2, another fan header, the front panel header, the power button, reset, and LED, another ARGB and RGB connection, another 4-pin header, a COM connection, and then AC97 or HD audio connection right here. So everything's going to be along the edge of the board, which is great. Now we have a huge jumble of cables here, of course, but what we're going to do is kind of sort it out. So first off, the ATX 24 pin is going to want to be your main cable outside of here. It's gonna kind of cover all of the other cables as well, and then we're going to feed it right into the upper grommet, as I mentioned earlier. So right into here, and I'm just putting everything in its place right now. So what we'll do actually, the upper grommet, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to pull in all the cables. Then we're just going to have it slide it right into the upper grommet as I showed earlier. Now we're going to grab those 8-pin EPS connection. If you remember, they were right next to ATX power, 2 CPU powers, EPS 8. We're going to slide under all these cables and then bring them both up over here on the top connection, top hole, as I showed you before in the case. And we're just staging everything right now. We'll get back to all the cables in a minute. So we're going to have the video card, but I'm gonna save that one for a little bit later on when we have the video card in place. Okay, so just sliding everything under there right now. Here, we'll go ahead and grab that ATX 24-pin cable and just slide that right into place. There's only one way to connect it, so thankfully not much of an issue there. And then we'll grab the ATX 8-pin and 4-pin. And now you may have some troubles at first because it may split up like this all the time, and that is a pain in the butt. So an easy way to do it is, since you know you're gonna be turning it this way, you'll grab one of the 4 and connect it. And now you'll grab the other 4 and connect that right next to it to make that 4+4 the 8-pin. And now we'll just go ahead and connect that 4-pin up here. Unfortunately, I can't get a good shot of that. It's a very tight spot, but hopefully that gives you a good idea there. And I'll just tuck this other 4-pin cable out of the way a little bit later when I'm making everything look nice and pretty. So now that we have the main power points in place, let's go ahead and connect the front panel Since we know back here, this is the back of the motherboard, is where the HD audio cable is going to go connected. We're gonna go ahead and slide that in real quick. So we'll slide it in under all the cables. Yeah, we'll do underneath the EPS cables. And again, we'll slide it in right now just for preparation. Then here we have the USB Type-C connection, and that's going to go ahead in one of these upper holes right over here. Now we have the USB 3 connection, and we're going to go ahead and slide that in the same spot where we just slid that USB-C connection. Notice how that ATX 24 pin cable kind of fell in line. Looks good. It's going to be a pain in the butt in a minute, but that's okay. And then we have here one of the most challenging for most people, the power LED reset and power switch. So we know they're going to be up here towards the very front of the case. So what I'll do is I'll slide it under all these other cables, even the ATX 24 pin. There is no exact way to cable other than connecting, and we'll make everything look pretty in a little bit. Just sliding them in for now. Then there is another USB 3.0. I don't remember where that is. Let's see. This motherboard doesn't have another USB 3.0. And that's okay. Not all motherboards will. But that's why I have this adapter, the perfect adapter. So rather than having two USB ports that we can't use, we'll just connect this adapter, and then we'll feed it in through one of the slots where we know the USB 2.0 headers were. And now two of the USB ports, while they won't be USB 3.0, they won't be dead ports. So it definitely comes in handy to have that little adapter. I'll link it down below in case you're interested as well. And that's it for the front panel. So coming around over here, we'll first connect the HD audio. You'll see the pins right down here. Now, if you notice, there is a blocked off pin right over here. And then there's going to be an open pin right over here on the HD97. You'll get the idea when you get closer yourself. Okay. And then we can just pull the excess in, and we'll deal with that in a little bit. Now with that USB 2.0 header that was originally 3.0, we can see right over here, just like the HD audio, there is that one missing connection, and that'll go ahead and coincide with that missing connection on the USB 2.0 header. So now let's go ahead and connect the dreaded front panel headers. Reset switch. So we'll see there is no negative or positive over here. It's just reset switch. So HD LED is the first two. Reset switch is the second two. Then we have power switch, okay, which is directly above the reset switch. And there is also here no positive or negative, so it doesn't matter how you connect that. And now there is power LED. Now you'll notice on power LED, there's a positive and there's a negative. Now here's where it can get a little confusing. So if we look at the silk screening again, power LED positive is on the left, negative is on the right. So we'll connect the positive on the left and the negative on the right. And then we'll see a little bit later on how that works. If not, we always know that we can switch everything around, and I'm going ahead and pulling back all the excess cabling so that it looks a little nicer. Okay, and now we have USB 3.0 header first. Now we're gonna go ahead and slide that behind the ATX 24 pin. And you'll notice there is a notch right over here on the connection. There's also a little opening right over here on the USB 3.0 header. You can see that right over here. And that little notch is going to slide right outside of that header, helping to show you that that connection has been made. You could see that right there. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and connect the USB-C connection. So the same way, we'll go ahead and slide it behind the ATX 24 pin. And then we'll go ahead and slide it in. Simple connection. And just push all the excess through. Same with the USB 3.0. Okay, now coming from the fan pump, there are going to be two headers. One is going to be for CPU fan, and then this one is going to be for the all-in-one. So on this board, the all-in-one header is right over here, and we'll just simply connect that right there. And then for CPU fan, that's going to be right up here on the very left. So we'll just grab that here. And just connect that right there. So this liquid cool unit has an ARGB connection. Then you'll notice right here, it says motherboard. So we'll go ahead and connect that to an ARGB header right up here. Keep it close to the top. And it's a 3-pin header. There's only one way to connect that. Now there's also the extension. That way, if you have more USB or more ARGB devices, you can just use this as a pass-through. That way you don't needlessly use up an ARGB header and then are missing some. So this is great of Sapphire to include. We're not going to need it, but still, it's still great that they include it. And then this is going to be used to connect the fans up here in the radiator up here to the actual liquid cooling unit. And then we have the SATA power. So for the SATA power, since we have cables coming across over here, I'm going to dump it through here. I may change that a little bit later on, but just so that you know what I'm going through the entire time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll end up changing that, but still, I want to show it to you. And I'll connect this cable in 1 second. So the case fans, I chose the Andes fans, which I'll go ahead and link down below, do have an ARGB flare to them. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that cable from the controller itself, right up here. I'm actually going to slide back, see if I can utilize. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm just going to disconnect this cable. So I'm just going to go ahead and feed it through here, since we do have cables already running through here, and then through this grommet. So we have the SATA power here from the fan controller that comes with the case, the 7000D airflow. And then we have the SATA power connection that comes from the fan controller here, which I completely forgot about. And then we have the SATA power here from the liquid cooling unit. So we've already eaten up all 3 of the SATA power connections from one of the 2 SATA power connections that we connected to the motherboard. So good thing we thought ahead and connected 2 of those, or else we wouldn't be able to use that SSD or one of the fans. So this gives me the great opportunity to go ahead and pop in the SATA drive. So I'll just take this cage out and just go ahead and line it up with the Samsung drive. And I'm just going to make sure to match up all these screw holes and just screw this in 1 second while I screw that in. All right, so all screwed in. So now just go ahead, slide that drive in. So we're going to have SATA data right here and SATA power right over here. And we'll go over that in a little bit once we get to this cable. So now using the very top SATA connection, these cables right over here, notice they have that little L connection. Okay, we'll just grab from the liquid cooling pump right over here. Okay, and then from the fan controller right over here. From the other fan controller, just right over here. Okay, so I thought there was only 3. Again, there are 4. So I could have used this, but then I'm probably going to have to move the cable all over here. And it's not going to look as nice. That way I give stuff for maybe the case and additional, and then over here for SATA power, if I wanted to add 2 additional SATA drives right over here, I could. But again, this, we're going over basics in a minute. We'll make it look nice and pretty. Then from the fan controller, the fan hub for the Anades fans, we have the regular fan connection here for ARGB. We could always use that extension from the liquid cooling pump and just connect them here. Or because it's such an awkward connection and that is the only one I have next, I could just connect it into the motherboard using this little hole down here and that ARGB connection that we have right over here. And actually 3-pin ARGB is right over here. Perfect. So we have one other additional header if we needed it, but for now we're good. Now we'll go ahead and connect this pump. So flipping this guy around, we'll see right here, coming from that cable that the liquid cooling unit comes from, we'll find that connection. So what I'll do is I'll grab that cable and I'll slide it right over here along with the USB 3 and the USB-C connection, and of course the ATX 24 pin, so that it comes out right here, and then I can connect those cables right over here. Now the liquid cooling unit is fully connected. Everything should work perfectly fine. So now I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the SATA data cable. And I'll take it out here just to show you how to connect it in case you're unsure. So on the SSD, you'll notice that little L-shaped connector that I've been talking about right over here. And then that's going to match up with the little L-shaped connector right over here. Okay, now that SATA data, that comes with the motherboard, or you could buy it separately. This side is going to connect to the motherboard. Then we'll grab the other SATA power cable from the power supply, and we can use whichever. I'll go ahead and use the end. That way I can tuck the rest away nicely. And then using the same L connectors, I'll just connect that right over there. It's a really easy connection. Sometimes you have to use a little force, but it's easy as it is. And then we can just put that away, not have to deal with it anymore. And then we can tuck the SATA power connections away because we won't need to use them anytime soon, at least. So now I'm just sliding in the SATA data connection through the back. Now we have SATA data right down here or SATA data right over here. It's your pick. I'm gonna go ahead and select right here on the bottom of the board. Now I could have chosen, and actually I originally chose a 90-degree angle. That way I can just connect it here and it slides down and you can't really tell, but this doesn't bother me at all. I kind of want to bring it over here, but there's already so much going on up here. Just to keep it a little more aesthetically pleasing, I'll go ahead and just leave it down here. The fan controller has a PWM fan header, which I'll go ahead and plug right over here. And I'm not focusing too much on the Anades one since it is a separate one I bought outside of the case. So I just connected it right here, right in between the SATA data cable and the front panel cables. Now we have the PWM cable, kind of to make it a little bit more of one bundle. Then I have another PWM connection. This one comes from the case fan controller. So I'll go ahead and do is I'll just bring it over here, slide it down here. Yeah, I'll move this one over here since it's a little bit longer of a cable. Then I'll go ahead and move the fan header right down here. Now coming over here to the video card, we'll just grab the card, pop it back in. And this is probably going to be temporary again because we're just connecting it right now so that I can show you how it looks with all the cables connected and leave it functioning. Okay. Now, I get to use the bottom grommet. It felt kind of lonely, so I'm gonna just slide some around here, bring it around, and right over here. I'm gonna focus on not blocking any kind of airflow or anything along these lines, but we don't have to worry too much about that back here. So now remember, that one has 3 cables. So what we're going to do is grab the first 2, which are just straight PCIe 8 pins or 6+2 pins. And I'm gonna go ahead and slide those in first so that they too would be the top ones. and I'll show you what I mean by top in a second. And then I'm going to slide the 6+2 that is also two 6+2s under both of those, since it is going to be the edge one. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the bottom one and I'm going to plug that one in to the very last PCIe connection, since it has this piece that we're going to want to hide. Okay, just slide the excess back in and we'll deal with this guy in a second. Then we'll grab the second PCIe cable, or the middle one, plug that in. And then we'll grab the top one, stringing across all of these. And now I'm gonna bring you in a little bit closer on how I connect this. I skipped over these two, but I'm gonna show you more and focused on this one. So we're gonna grab that cable. You'll notice on the bottom of the cable, there's a little clip right over here. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and clip right under here. So what we're going to do is we're going to join the 6+2 to make it an 8. Then we're gonna slide it right in here, and you're gonna notice that little pin kind of go up a little bit and snap into place in a second, and you'll hear a little click. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that's how you plug in a PCIe connection. All right, so as it is right now, we have the video card plugged in, the CPU plugged in, the motherboard plugged in, we have the SSD plugged in, and the liquid cooling unit. Everything is plugged in, everything will work. Minus these fans, which I'll connect now in this portion of the video. All the front panel, USB, HD audio, everything is connected. Now what we're going to do is make everything look pretty. So if you don't care about the way it looks, you can go ahead, skip to the very end, the outro, where we discuss everything we've gone through, the good points and the bad parts, then talk about the build video, maybe anything else. Or you could stick around and watch this. Now this part is not going to have any description. It's basically going to be me kind of in fast forward, blah, 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 connecting everything, making it look nice and pretty. Now, I do recommend it looking pretty. It looking pretty more than likely is going to mean that airflow is going to be the best. The better the airflow, the better overall system performance, the better your video card is cooled, the better your CPU is cooled, the better your heat sinks are cooled, everything. But anyway, the end is going to show how it looks like. The outro is going to show on how it looks like, all nice and prettied up. But anyway, let's get started. So to wrap things up, in this video, I showed you how to cable everything to get it to work. While it didn't look pretty, it would have worked perfectly fine. So then we took that step and moved it a little further. I showed you how to make it showroom perfect. I'm kind of stretching things when I say showroom perfect because we had so many fans, the liquid cooling unit, and then a few other oddities. I had a lot of troubles getting the cables to look perfect. It wouldn't have been impossible, but this video would have been, however long it is now, an hour or 2 or 3 longer. And you definitely don't want to sit through that. Now, again, what made it so difficult was the fact that there are 6 fans. 6 fans on their own wouldn't have been difficult, but there's 6 fans with ARGB cables as well. So 2 cables from each fan connecting into the controller. That controller has its own cables going into a controller, going out. That became very difficult. With that, the bundle of cables the Sapphire liquid cooling unit came with. There was a bunch up at the top at the radiator with the fans. Then on the actual pump itself, you know, a bunch of cables coming from both rather than maybe one combined cable coming from one combined cable coming from another and connecting. Now, mind you, this is Sapphire's first attempt at liquid cooling. So we don't know how good or bad it is just yet. That'll come up in the next video. Now, talking about the next video, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to flash the BIOS, how to configure the BIOS after it's flashed, then how to install Windows 11. Windows 11, because of the 12900K processor, we want to make sure that we have all the task scheduling and everything with the performance and the E-cores, make sure everything works perfectly fine. Then, of course, we always want to get the latest and the greatest to make sure that we're not leaving any sort of performance on the table. There can be a complete discussion on Windows 10 versus 11. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to use 11 because it is the latest and the greatest. Let me know what you think down in the comments below about the whole entire video. Did I help you with your own cabling woes? Did I help clear anything up for you? Are there any other questions that maybe I left on the table that I didn't quite answer? I do reply to everyone. I love to help you out. So again, my next video is going to be flashing the BIOS, configuring the BIOS, installing Windows along with all the drivers, and then of course, before all of that, turning her on for the first time. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou. See you guys.